Now, let's talk about the competition that Microsoft is actually most worried about, because LibreOffice serves one segment of the market, the offline, privacy-first, cost-zero segment. But there's another front where Microsoft is facing a challenger with real momentum, real infrastructure, and real enterprise credibility. According to Gartner data cited in 2025 market research, Google Workspace now accounts for 46% of company primary suite usage, compared to 48% for Microsoft. That 2 percentage point gap is the narrowest it has ever been. And it is moving in one direction. Google Workspace, at its business starter tier, offers custom business email, video meetings for up to 100 participants, 30 gigabytes of cloud storage per user, and AI integration through Google's Gemini platform, all for $6 per user per month at standard pricing, with significant discounts available through authorized resellers. Compare that to Microsoft 365 Business Basic at the new July 2026 price of $7 per user per month, which on paper sounds similar, but when you factor in the full enterprise stack that Microsoft users typically rely on, the real-world cost comparison becomes dramatically different. And this is where the power shift becomes visible. Microsoft's pricing strategy is, at its core, a bet. A bet that the switching costs will always outweigh the savings. A bet that the inertia of existing infrastructure will keep enterprises locked, and regardless of what the renewal invoice says. And for large, deeply integrated enterprise customers, that bet is probably right. The consultant's calculation that migration costs exceed 3 years of subscription savings is real, and it applies to organizations that have spent years building custom SharePoint environments and Teams integrations and Azure-based identity systems. Those companies are not going anywhere. Microsoft knows it, and Microsoft is charging them accordingly. But the bet starts to look shakier when you look at the customers at the edges. The 10-person law firm that uses Microsoft 365 primarily for Word documents and email. The freelance design studio that runs on Excel and occasionally shares PowerPoint decks. The nonprofit organization managing a tight budget and using Microsoft tools because that's what everyone used back in 2015 when they set everything up. For these users, the switching cost is not 3 years of subscription value. The switching cost is 1 weekend of setup time. And when the renewal email arrives, showing a 17% price increase on Business Standard or a 33% jump on the Frontline plan, that weekend of setup time starts looking like a very reasonable investment. What most people are not seeing is that this moment represents something larger than a software pricing decision. It represents a structural shift in the economics of productivity software that has been building for a decade and is now accelerating faster than at any prior point. The entire premise of Microsoft Office's market dominance was built on a foundation of irreplaceability. In 1995 and 2005, even in 2015, there was no credible, fully functional, widely adopted alternative that could do what Microsoft Office did. The free alternatives were clunky, the compatibility was terrible, and the learning curve was steep enough to make switching feel dangerous. That world is gone. LibreOffice 26. 2 is not the same product it was in 2012. Google Workspace is not a toy. The gap between what Microsoft charges and what a serious alternative costs has never been wider. And the gap between what those alternatives can actually do and what Microsoft can do has never been narrower. Let's look at the numbers one more time, because the arithmetic of this moment is striking. A small business running 25 users on Microsoft 365 Business Standard, which goes from $12.50 to $14 per user per month in July 2026, is now paying an additional $450 per year for the exact same core functionality. Multiply that across hundreds of thousands of small businesses, and you are looking at a revenue extraction strategy that Microsoft's own pricing announcements have described as being tied to AI features that most of these users will never open. Microsoft 365. Personal, for home users, hit $99, $99 per year before the 2026 commercial changes, a level that prompted users on Microsoft's own community forums to ask, in published posts, what justification there was for what one user called a 30% increase. The product team's official response: Copilot has been added to all Office applications, and the price reflects unlimited AI access. The problem is that nobody asked for unlimited AI access. They asked for Word and Excel. According to informed sources tracking enterprise IT spending patterns, the reaction from corporate procurement departments to the July 2026 announcement has been, in many cases, not panic, but calculation. Companies that had never seriously evaluated alternatives are now running formal competitive analyses. Google Workspace is getting evaluation licenses it wouldn't have received 12 months ago. LibreOffice is being tested in pilot environments at organizations that would have dismissed it 2 years ago. The calculation has changed, and Microsoft's own pricing decision is what changed it. Here's what makes this moment genuinely dangerous for Microsoft, even if the short-term revenue numbers look healthy. Ecosystems are not switched overnight, but they are switched. And the decisions made at the evaluation stage in 2026 determine who gets the renewal in 2028 and 2029. Every company that runs a serious pilot of Google Workspace right now, even if they ultimately stay with Microsoft, has reduced the friction of switching in the future. Every IT department that trains staff on LibreOffice as a backup environment has reduced the cost of transition. Every developer who builds a workflow around Google Docs instead of SharePoint is creating an asset that pulls the organization further from the Microsoft ecosystem, one quarter at a time. The real story is that Microsoft's pricing strategy is optimized for the next 2 years. The technology industry's response to that strategy is being optimized for the next 10. They didn't send you a warning. They didn't ask for your permission. They didn't even give you a real choice. One morning, Microsoft quietly updated a number on a page buried inside your account settings, and just like that, your bill went up. Not by a few dollars, not by a small forgettable percentage, by 33%. And the most disturbing part isn't the number itself. The most disturbing part is how many people haven't noticed yet. Because while you were busy working, building, and paying, Microsoft was running a calculation, and you were on the wrong side of it. There's a very specific kind of corporate confidence that only comes when a company believes it has you trapped. It doesn't announce itself loudly. It doesn't argue with you. It simply raises the price, updates the billing page, and waits. Because it already knows that most people will pay. That is exactly what happened when Microsoft made one of the most aggressive pricing moves in its recent history. And if you are still using Microsoft 365 right now without knowing what changed, when it changed, and what it actually means for your wallet over the next 12 months, then this is the conversation you didn't know you needed to have. Let's start with the number that triggered everything. On December 5th, 2025, Microsoft made an announcement that sent shockwaves through the enterprise technology world. Commercial Microsoft 365 and Office 365 subscriptions were getting a price hike, effective July 1st, 2026, across every single business tier, every plan, every category, every customer. And here's where it gets uncomfortable. The increase wasn't uniform, it was surgical. Microsoft 365 E3 went from $36 to $39 per user per month. E5 went from $57 to $60. Business Basic climbed to $7, Business Standard to $14. But the number that stops people cold, the one that reveals exactly what Microsoft is doing here, is the 33% increase on the F1 Frontline Worker Plan, which jumped from $2.25 to $3. 0 per user per month. Think about what that means. The plan designed for the people with the least spending power, the warehouse workers, the shift managers, the frontline employees, got hit the hardest. That is not an accident. And before you comfort yourself by thinking this only affects big corporations, consider the scale of what we're talking about. Microsoft 365 is used by over 400 million paid seats globally. This isn't a niche software update. This is one of the most widely distributed subscription products in the history of technology. When Microsoft moves that number, even by a few dollars per user per month, the compounding effect across hundreds of thousands of businesses is staggering. A company running 500 seats on Microsoft 365 E3 alone is now looking at an additional $18,000 per year, for nothing new, for the exact same product they were already paying for. But here's where it gets worse. This isn't the first time, and that pattern is what makes this moment different from a simple price adjustment. In 2022, Microsoft raised prices on most of its Office 365 and Microsoft 365 subscriptions, the first major increase in a decade. E3 went from $30 to $36 at that time. Then in 2024, Microsoft raised prices on its on-premises Office servers by 10%. Then came the 5% increases for specific licensing plans in early 2025. And now this, a sweeping across-the-board commercial price hike set to land in July 2026. What you're watching is not a company reacting to market conditions. What you're watching is a company executing a multi-year pricing escalation strategy. And they have been very, very patient about it. The official justification, as always, is innovation. Microsoft will tell you, and has told you through every blog post and earnings call, that these increases reflect the enormous investment they've made in the platform. They will point to over 1,100 new features added to Microsoft 365 in recent years. They will highlight AI-powered Copilot being embedded into Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and Outlook. They will talk about security upgrades, management tools, and the future of intelligent workplaces. And look, some of that is real. Copilot is genuinely useful for certain users. The security features are legitimately improved. But here's the question. Nobody at Microsoft headquarters wants you to ask, did you ask for any of that? Because bundling features you never requested into a subscription you already had, and then charging you more for the bundle, is not innovation. That is a pricing strategy dressed up in the language of progress. And what most people are not seeing is how this decision was designed to make leaving feel more expensive than staying. Think about it. If you are a business that has been running on Microsoft 365 for 5 years, you have built your entire workflow inside that ecosystem. Your emails are in Outlook. Your files are in SharePoint. Your calls happen through Teams. Your identity management runs through Azure Active Directory. Your compliance tools are baked into the Microsoft security stack. To walk away from Microsoft 365 at this point isn't just choosing a different word processor. It's a full infrastructure migration. And those cost time, money, and risk. Microsoft knows this. According to informed sources in enterprise IT consulting, the average migration away from a deeply integrated Microsoft 365 environment can cost more than 2 to 3 years worth of the subscription itself when you factor in professional services, retraining, and transition downtime. That is the cage Microsoft has been building for years. The 33% price hike is just the moment they locked the door. And yet, something unexpected is happening. And this is where everything changes. Because while enterprise IT departments are doing the math on migration costs and negotiating desperately with Microsoft resellers, a very different population is making a very different decision. Individual users, freelancers, small business owners, and even entire government departments are quietly walking away. And they are walking towards something that has existed for years, cost absolutely nothing, and is now experiencing one of the most dramatic surges in user adoption in its history. LibreOffice, the free open source Office suite developed by the Document Foundation, has become the unexpected center of gravity in this entire story. Here's what the download numbers are telling us. In early 2025, around the same time, Microsoft began rolling out its layered price increases. LibreOffice started hitting nearly 1 million downloads per week. That figure, according to the Document Foundation, represented the highest weekly download rate since 2023. And this wasn't a spike caused by a viral moment or a news story. This was a sustained, growing wave of users who had done the math, looked at their renewal emails, and decided the answer was no. According to Mike Saunders, an open source advocate and deputy to the board of directors at the Document Foundation, the organization estimates approximately 200 million LibreOffice users worldwide, though they acknowledge that exact tracking is difficult because, unlike Microsoft, they respect user privacy and don't monitor installs. 200 million users on a product that costs nothing. Read that again. 200 million people are already using a free alternative to Microsoft Office, and that number was growing before July 2026. Now imagine what happens when tens of millions of business subscribers open their renewal notice and see the new price for the first time. The real story is not that LibreOffice is new. The real story is that it is finally reaching the kind of mainstream credibility that makes it a genuine threat to Microsoft's most reliable revenue stream. And what exactly are those 200 million people getting for free? That question deserves an honest answer, because this is where most conversations about free alternatives become vague and unconvincing. LibreOffice is not a stripped-down, feature-limited demo. It is a full productivity suite that includes Writer, which replaces Microsoft Word, Calc, which replaces Excel, Impress, which replaces PowerPoint, Base, which handles database functions similar to Access, and Draw, which covers vector graphics and basic design work. The suite runs natively on Windows, Mac OS, and Linux. It opens, edits, and saves files in docs, XLSX, and PPTX formats, meaning your existing files don't disappear when you switch. The compatibility story, which was once LibreOffice's weakest argument, has become its strongest one, with version 26. 2 released in 2026, the headaches around docx and XLSX formatting errors that plagued earlier versions have been largely resolved. Users who made the switch have reported that complex documents, including multi-section manuscripts, custom tables, and embedded graphics, transferred with minimal formatting disruption. And the individual consumer sits at the most interesting position of all in this story. Because for the individual, the writer, the student, the small business owner, the remote worker building something on their own, the math has never been simpler. LibreOffice is free. It handles your Word documents. It handles your Excel spreadsheets. It handles your PowerPoint presentations. It runs on Windows, Mac, and Linux. It respects your privacy. It doesn't require a subscription. It doesn't raise its price. It doesn't bundle AI features into your bill without asking. According to users who made the switch in 2025 and 2026 and documented the experience publicly, the transition from Microsoft 365 to LibreOffice typically took between 1 and 3 days of familiarization before productivity returned to baseline. 3 days. In exchange for zero recurring cost and complete data sovereignty. That is the decision millions of people are making right now in real time on the other side of Microsoft's pricing announcement. Not all of them will stay. Some will miss the cloud sync or the Teams integration or the polished AI suggestions that Copilot delivers. But a significant number will discover, as one widely shared user account put it, that they had been paying for years for features they never used, while the free alternative sat quietly available and more than sufficient for everything they actually needed. And this brings us to the question that nobody at Microsoft's licensing division wants to answer publicly. What happens when the next price increase comes? Because if the pattern holds, and the pattern has held consistently since 2022, another increase is coming. The IDC analysis of the December 2025 announcement noted that these list price increases will ultimately influence end customer pricing across all territories and currencies. Enterprise agreements are still negotiable, but negotiation is possible only when the list price is the starting point. And when the list price goes up, the negotiated price follows it upward. The next floor is higher than the last one, always. Market analysts tracking Microsoft's commercial software division estimate that there is a reasonable probability of another major commercial pricing adjustment arriving in late 2027 or 2028, timed likely with the next major feature expansion of the Copilot platform and possibly with the end of certain legacy licensing structures. If that estimate is accurate, businesses that begin transition planning now are buying themselves options. Businesses that wait are buying themselves a higher invoice. The users who are running to LibreOffice today are not running because it is perfect. They are running because the calculation has changed. They are running because the gap between free and good enough and expensive and more than I need has crossed a threshold that makes inertia feel expensive. They are running because something shifted in the spring and summer of 2026, in the quiet, invisible way that real economic changes always begin, before anyone was ready to call it a movement. But here's the question you should be sitting with right now. Is this the ceiling? Is July 2026 the peak of Microsoft's pricing ambition, or is it a stepping stone to something larger? Is LibreOffice a permanent destination for millions of users, or a temporary protest that fades when the next wave of AI features makes Microsoft's platform feel indispensable again? Is Google Workspace closing that 2 percentage point gap, or will Microsoft's enterprise lock-in prove more durable than any pricing pressure can overcome? Because the history of technology is full of moments that looked like tipping points and turned out to be pauses. And it is equally full of moments that looked like minor price adjustments and turned out to be the first crack in a wall that had seemed permanent. Microsoft has been the dominant force in productivity software for 30 years. The question being asked in IT boardrooms, in home offices, in government procurement departments, and in the download servers of the Document Foundation right now, the question that nobody has a clean answer to, is whether 31 years is where that dominance peaks, or whether it is simply the latest chapter in a story that Microsoft has always controlled. The bill went up. Millions are already moving. What happens next is something nobody has fully mapped. But whatever it is, it has already started.